Welcome to Books and Brews Light, number 52. We are here with Marc Liebman, who writes counterterrorism and thrillers. Is that correct?
Yes, I really write in three genres. I have An Age of Sin is a unique historical fiction type book, and it takes place between 1775 and 1812, or the War of 1812. And it's unique because it follows the careers of both an American and a Brit. And then I have some counterterrorism novels, and then I have some historical fiction in a series that follows the career of a young naval officer, to which some of my friends say there's more fact than fiction in those books, but or is it they're novels? And I'm sticking to it.
I do say that of my books, that they really are 100% true, apart from the little detail of time travel, because of the research that went into it. I think that's part of what makes a good book. So you have had a very interesting life. You have not let the grass grow under your feet. Tell my audience a little bit about your three careers you've had.
Okay, so I'm an old guy. I literally turned 80 this summer.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So I spent most of my childhood in West Germany before the wall fell. My father was a career Air Force officer. I went to college. I always wanted to be a military pilot. The Navy guaranteed me pilot training. The Air Force wouldn't. So I spent a bunch of years in the Navy as a helicopter pilot, not by choice. But that's the way the cookie crumbled, so to speak. And I had a choice: either drop out and quit and give up a lifelong dream, or go be a helicopter pilot. So I flew mostly combat search and rescue and special operations in my career, which lasted 26 odd years. I got to do a lot of fun things, and a lot of things that were not so much fun. And then I retired. I spent a couple years as a corporate pilot, and then I wound up becoming a management consultant, and did that until I retired in 2015. And now I told people in 2015, when I left the firm that I literally helped grow from 9 people to over 350,
Wow.
that I could afford to become a full-time author.
Mm-hmm.
Now I write in those three genres, although I'll get to that in a second. I'm about to expand my genres here. And I do public speaking on aviation history, Revolutionary War history up to the period of 1860.
Can you explain, for those who are not in the military, the difference between a naval captain and an Air Force captain?
Yes, there's a huge difference.
Two totally different things.
Yes, an Air Force captain is in the standardized rank structure in 03. So first lieutenant captain. In the Navy structure, in the same standardized command structure, a Navy captain is the equivalent of a full colonel in the Army, Air Force, or Marine Corps. So refer to ourselves as those sixes, and it's significant. It's obviously significantly different from a rank structure.
I should explain, for those who have no connection with the military, I grew up in the Air Force, so I happen to know these things. The E is for enlisted and the O is for officers. So 06 means officer of the 6th rank. And I've always found it interesting, having been young when my father was in the Air Force, watched him go through the ranks. I can remember when he was a captain and became a major and became a lieutenant colonel. And so it's always kind of funny to me to hear the captain is the very highest in the Navy, or close to the highest anyway. And why is the structure so different, the titles?
Well, let's throw this on the table, but who ever heard of a colonel commanding a ship?
Okay, fair enough.
So
they just changed it.
Our ranks from our mother country and its Navy, the Royal Navy. So when you look at the traditions of the U.S. Navy, you can trace many of them. Now, there are some that are different, back to the Royal Navy, one of which is our command structure. A lot of our traditions came from the Royal Navy. We've even modified them to adapt to the U.S. and our needs. But I've served on Canadian ships and Royal Navy ships, and I can tell you that they're just like ours. And
Hmm.
the best thing about them is they have a bar that's open. So if you
That's nice.
his or
So,
her port
so all
is
our
there.
sailors are drunk, is what you're saying.
Pardon me?
I said all our sailors are drunk.
No, actually, there's very little drinking that goes on. That's what's
Is there
amazing.
really?
You do so. What's really interesting is, the Brits up until recently gave a ration of grog, which is rum and water and a little bit of lime,
Mhm.
to their sailors, and I've had it. It's actually not bad. And then
Let
the
me tell
officer.
you an interesting story. There is a place in Duluth. I wouldn't call it a bar. It's far too nice to be called a bar, but they only serve drinks. And they happen to have somehow this stash from about 70 years ago of Royal Navy rum turned up. And so they bought a whole bunch of it. And so you've got this rum that people thought was gone decades ago. So we have actually had that. And I'm not a huge rum drinker, but my husband loved it or whatever it was.
I stopped drinking years ago because, well, one, my wife was diabetic, and two, um, I have an occasional beer, an occasional glass of wine. That's about it.
Mhm.
But um, so just as an aside about messes, officer
Mhm.
messes, field Desert Storm, I had operational command and control of the helicopter detachments in the Persian Gulf. There's from 14 nations. I had about 150 40 odd helicopters. And so I flew around to each of them on periodically to go visit with the helidets. And of course, I would always show up on the Italian ships at lunchtime
Mhm.
because the food was
The
spectacular.
food. That's great. Now, you've been in both Vietnam and I think Operation Desert Storm.
Spent time in Vietnam as a combat search and rescue pilot, special operations pilot,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
also
Where were you based out of?
on a boat mostly. Um, so we were in the upper part of the Gulf of Tonkin.
Mhm.
So I was on Yankee Station. When I was on a destroyer or cruiser, I was up the northern part of the Gulf of Tonkin, hoping
Mhm.
that no.
Yeah,
And then,
my dad was there at the same time you were, and I believe he was in Saigon, but he was in the Air Force, not the Navy.
well, from one Vietnam vet to another, tell your dad, welcome home. He'll know exactly what I mean.
I will. Um, since given the nature of your writing and the subjects, have any of your personal experiences kind of played into your writing?
Yes. So my first two books that I published, Big Mother 40 and Turbs 2, they really started out as one manuscript. I found a publisher who liked it because I was trying to, this is before the days of self-publishing. And he said, I really love the book, the manuscript, but it's really two books because it's too long. Let's split
Mhm.
it. So we did, and it became Turbs 2 and Big Mother 40. And there's it's some probably of the books I've written, probably the most autobiographical.
Mhm.
Um, and then he said to me, as I was we're getting ready to publish the first one, he said, oh, by the way, to make these a success, you need to have a series of at least 5 books.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so I then would start scrambling around, and we now have a series of 7 books. Um, so Syrup's 2, Big Mother 40, Render Harmless, Interlook, Forgotten, Moscow Airlift, and the Simishir Island Incident. So that series loosely follows the career of a mythical naval officer, but it's a lot of stuff that I did, including
Mhm.
exchange trophy, um, stuff off the coast of Korea, combat SAR, and special operations. So,
Now
and
I'm curious, given that you were a captain, you probably have a fairly high security clearance or did at the time. How does putting any of this in fiction, where do you find the balance?
okay, so that's a great question, and the answer is actually pretty simple. I
Mhm.
write, I think, is deep, and then every one of the novels that deal with the Navy during my lifetime, during my career period, which is essentially
Mhm.
1908 through 1993, for four rather,
Mhm.
I send to the Navy to have blessed.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
And would that
And
be typical, say, of the Bourne series or any of these that deal with military? Would they all have to send it to be approved?
no, unless the rules have changed since I retired, but the standing rule or the standing rule of thumb is that if you had a high clearance above TS, you
Hmm.
should do this, because if you're like me, the a lot of those programs that you're read into are themselves, the names are themselves classified. So
Hmm.
some are have time periods, some of them are lifetime. So the simple thing is just send it to send it in, have them bless it. You know, there's a form you fill out. There's a process to do it. It takes about 45 to 60 days normally to
Hmm.
get back. And let's see, I got to count, probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 books to the Navy to get blessed.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've got comments back saying, "Hey, we would like you to change this." And most of the
Okay.
changes are at a detail level saying, "Hey, um, you probably don't remember, but this you can't use these two words." Or
Okay.
they're kind of the most fun. As I got one came back, it was actually for the same book, um, from and he said, "Hey, we realize what you're trying to do, but your description of the flag spaces on the USS Blue Ridge, which is the Seventh Fleet flagship, are a bit
Hmm.
too. Could you do something?" And the word I
Hmm.
said, but the funnier one was in the same book. I get a call about 3 or 4 weeks later, or about 2 or 3 days, uh, short time after, I don't remember, from somebody at the Naval Reconnaissance Office, or National Reconnaissance Office. And he says, "Hey, Captain," he said, "I'm looking at reading your manuscript. I really like the book, but there's a section here where you're talking about resolution of photographs." And I said,
Hmm.
"Comfortable here at NRO." And I said, "Great, hang on a second." So I packed away on my computer and I said, "Do you have access to the internet?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Let me send you an email with a link." So I cut and paste the link, pickled off the email, and said, "This is what I used, and I dumbed this down, and it came
Hmm.
from." And he said, "Well, let me read that for a few seconds." And all
Hmm.
and oh blank feces. And I said, he said, "I understand. Can you dumb it down farther, and I'll deal with this." And so about a week later, I went to that Wikipedia link, and it was all changed.
Really? Oh, see, and this brings me to a question. Sometimes I plan these questions out. In fact, I always do, but don't always follow them if the conversation takes us elsewhere. Because what jumps to my mind is the idea of a book having to be realistic so that the reader doesn't lose the suspension of disbelief. So, do you have few enough people who know all this stuff? Or if they read something and they go, I know that's not true because I was there, do they just kind of
Well,
accept that you can't say that stuff?
I spent about 40% of the time writing the first manuscript doing research. So
Hmm.
about why I do this. But most of the people who read my books will tell you that there's enough detail in there so they understand what's happening, or
Hmm.
what things are being used, but not enough so they roll their eyes in their eyes roll in the back of their heads. So one
Hmm.
day, and this gentleman walks up to my table and says, "Hey, would you sign this book for me?" And it's a copy of Moscow Airlift. It takes place in 1991, in a lot of it in Moscow as the Soviet Union is coming apart. And I said, "Sure, I'm happy to sign it." So I signed the thing. I said, well, and he says to me, "By the way, everything you wrote in this book was absolutely true about what was going
Hmm.
on in Moscow." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" He said, "Well, I was the army attaché in Moscow at the time." And so talking to him, so that was about the time I was doing a lot of work on the Seventh Fleet staff. And I can tell you, at least it's my humble opinion, that I don't think anybody in CIA, British MI5 or 6, or any Western intelligence services, including the KGB, which is not Western, but had any idea
Hmm.
how fast it would come apart.
Hmm.
Um, I don't
Yeah, I
think that.
got that impression at the time.
Yeah, and so this gentleman and I have since talked. We did belong to, actually, it turns out, the same veteran service organization. So we've talked a lot of times about where I got the information, what I wrote, and stuff like that. Yeah, the plot's fictitious, but a lot of the historical background is spot on, and that's what I
Well,
try to do.
it's interesting listening to you talk about the writing of it, because my husband he knows some things. And so sometimes we're watching this type of movie and he'll be like, that's not true. And he probably, I don't know if you should tell me that's not true. I mean, he doesn't give me any details and I don't ask because I know I can't. But sometimes it's like, okay, just shut up and let me enjoy the movie, because unless you have that clearance, you don't know that. But for him, it can be very distracting.
Oh yeah,
And it helps me to understand from the writer's perspective why they do and say some of these things. See, my books are set in medieval Scotland, so there's no one to object if I spilled military secrets of 1314. So I don't have to send mine in anywhere.
aye, laddie, but you have to roll your R's when you read books.
Right. So
Um,
sorry, go ahead.
so your husband would probably say the same thing as I do. I tell potential readers the books are historically accurate and what I call operate, which means that I'm sure your husband goes nuts when he sees somebody running into a room carrying a pistol, and then the next scene is he comes around the corner shooting at the bad guys. He's carrying a different pistol and he's fired 8 or 15 or 20 rounds and he hasn't reloaded yet.
He comments on that all the time. He's like, they fired off 600 bullets and never reloaded. And well, I had to laugh too, because we actually have a shooting range out in our backyard is 21 acres. And, I went out to shoot a raccoon that we trapped that was trying to steal our chickens' eggs and kill our chickens. And so every time, I've managed to get either my husband or our farmhand to shoot all these skunks and raccoons and things that we're catching. And this time I said, okay, I have to do it myself. And every time they yank it back, they see there's a bullet in the chamber and then they shoot it. So I yanked it back. Now I've got 2 bullets jammed in the chamber and I had to wait for him to clear it. So I went down the next day. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I had it right up. We ended up having to shoot it 3 times. But the funny part of it, it's okay, that's not funny. But you look at movies and all these people just pick up a gun and start shooting. And the more familiar I get with guns, every single one has a different safety. They handle different. They feel different. You have to know how to load it, what bullets to put in. There's so much to know. And yet every movie, these street thugs just pick up a gun and start shooting and know exactly what to do.
Yeah, part of the problem, into the politics of that, but that's part of the problem. It's why even police officers don't practice. For instance, the state of Texas, they're only required to shoot 50 rounds a year. I'm
Really?
and I practice every month, at least once a month, and I shoot 3. But yeah, so you have to deal with raccoons and skunks. I had to deal with wild pigs, and
scary.
And they're when I say a different animal, I mean they're a different animal, but I mean they take a much larger caliber round to put down.
Yeah, they would.
And the first time I thought a 30 round would put one down, I hit him in the bone right here, and he looked like just smacked him in the face, and I had to get around behind him to hit him behind the rib cage to kill him. And from that point on, I used a 03 Springfield with an M30-06 round, and it does the job from any aspect. But yeah, it's just so. I've taught both my children to shoot. My daughter doesn't like to shoot, but she's comfortable handling a firearm. And I've taught all my grandkids how to shoot. I don't care if they like firearms or not. I just want to make sure that they're comfortable. So if they see one, they know what is involved. And it all starts with treat every gun as if it's loaded. But anyway, we're diverging.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy that my husband has taught me to shoot and he's taught my sons to shoot and he got them very enthusiastic. So I have one who is in the academy to become a cop right now. and I have another who's in the military. And then I think most of the rest of my boys can shoot a little bit too. They have a little familiarity, but those two really, that changed their lives. So do you have a reading ready from, I think The Forgotten
Sure.
is the first of the two books, right?
Yep. So this is Forgotten.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to read you the a section from the intro, or the first. It's called Revolutionary Action. So you have to understand that these two books are about I'll give you the generic, the elevator for each of the two books. So Forgotten is about 6 POWs who do not come home at the end of the Vietnam War. They're held by a drug lord who's masquerading as a North Vietnamese colonel, excuse me. And when they're finally rescued, there are people here in the United States who want them dead. One of the POW's wives was a member of an organization called the Students for. They're held by this drug lord until they're rescued, and the wife of one of them is a member of the Students for Democratic Societies, what they call Action Wing, and it's a real live domestic terrorist action. So she is sent to Cuba in Forgotten to learn by SDS to learn how to become an assassin. She goes freelance, and that's what the story is about. The basic story is about. She's probably the most interesting character I've ever created. So I'm going to read from a short passage from the prologue of Forgotten, which won a bunch of national awards. It was an Amazon bestseller. This scene takes place in Northbrook, Illinois, in March of 1967. A blacked out sedan slid to a stop outside a storefront with the four service logos that indicated it was a U.S. Armed Forces recruiting station. A single desk light left on by one of the recruiters when he departed dimly illuminated the space. Despite the all-black attire, a passerby would have easily identified the figure as a shapely woman. She had a mason jar in each hand and a brick under her armpit. Each jar had a rag sticking out of the lid. She stopped a body's length from the large picture window where the light from inside the recruiting station faded out and the shadows began. She carefully put down the mason jars on the cement sidewalk. Then she hurled the brick underhand like a softball pitcher. The plate glass window cracked with a satisfying sound before the shattering glass left a gaping hole. With a butane lighter, the woman lit the first mason jar and lobbed it into the recruiting center. It smashed on one of the steel desks, spreading an exploding mixture of soap and gasoline. The second jar landed to the left of the first. By the time the woman got back in her car, the recruiting station was a blazing inferno. 15 minutes later, the stolen Fairline slid to a stop in a small shopping mall parking lot, well away from the stores. In one practice moment, the bomber pulled out a .45 caliber pistol out of a shoulder holster, put it to the temple of the driver. Brain and blood splattered him on the driver's side window. She walked across the lot to another car, a steel gray Volvo 123S GT with red leather seats, unlocked it and drove away. It took 2 hours to get back to the University of Wisconsin-Madison's campus. Once inside her studio apartment, the driver dialed the number of a fellow student. She knew he was a night owl. Bill, it's Julia. Want to fuck? Now? Yes. I need a good fucking. Be right over. Around 4 a.m, Julia ushered the young man out of her apartment. He couldn't get it up a third time, and therefore was of no use to her. Still dissatisfied, she masturbated till she had another orgasm and then fell asleep. After her alarm went off at 7, Julia watched a breathless TV commentator describe the hour's top short story of a firebombing of a military recruiting station in Northbrook, Illinois. Fire department investigators said the fire was started by a napalm-like mixture. The communique released by the Revolutionary Wing of the Students for Democratic Society had reclaimed responsibility. The organization, he reported, was opposed to the war in Vietnam. In another story, the Chicago stations broadcasts news. Yeah, I can't read here. And in another story in the Chicago station's broadcast, a newscaster announced that a young female had been found shot to death in a Deerfield Mall parking lot. The police had no suspects for either the fire or the murder. Satisfied with her night's work, Julia Amy Lucas turned off the TV. She had just turned 21, and this was her first act as a member of the Revolutionary Wing of the Students for Democratic Society. What surprised her was how much she liked it. That's how this book starts. It's it gets pretty graphic in a few places.
Mhm.
The story goes she becomes a freelance assassin and earns a title or a moniker called the Red Star of Death.
Okay.
And she works through a cutout, and she's hired by intelligence agencies from around the world. She has no idea who they are. She primarily uses firearms because she feels anything else is messy, and nobody ever knows who she looks like. Nobody's ever caught her. She doesn't leave traces behind. She rarely leaves brass behind. They never find firearms because she disassembles them and tosses them in different trash cans as she's leaving the scene. It goes through a whole bunch of statecraft. So the book won 3 national awards, was an Amazon bestseller. I had a lot of readers ask me, "Hey, you ought to write a sequel."
Hmm. Now, Julia is the one who is later known as Janet Pulaski, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So
And
her
what is it that you find most especially interesting about her?
her ruthlessness, but also the fact she's very vulnerable. So as
Mhm.
Forgotten progresses, she gets not she gets used to the killing. It's just a job to her. In the beginning, it was a rush, and then it became
Mhm.
just something she did, and she was very good at it, and she got paid really well for it. But you can't have a relationship with somebody else.
Right.
Okay, how do you have a relationship with somebody else when you essentially are a professional murderer? Well, in this book, you find out how she does. Okay, and she meets somebody that she met in Cuba at this terrorist training site who left the organization, and she stumbles upon her in Germany towards the end of the book, and they want to have a relationship, and um, the German says, "Hey, I'm okay with that, but you have to retire."
Right. Now, I thought, wasn't she the wife of one of the POWs?
Correct.
Okay,
She is the wife
but
of one.
that was purely a marriage to use him.
No, actually, what
No?
happened?
Okay.
And he's a naval aviator based at Lemoore Naval Air Station, California. Goes off to Vietnam, gets shot down, and becomes a POW. And he's declared
Hmm.
as the North Vietnamese were not very good, or good is not the right word, but I'll use the word good, I guess, in reporting who they had captured. They were very deceitful. They didn't report all the people they had, and they reported some of the people that they knew were dead. And basically to confuse the US. It was not until
Right.
C was released because they thought he was nuts. And what he had done is he had memorized the names of 600 and some odd men,
I've heard this story. Yeah, it's an
and
amazing
he
story.
basically gets out and literally writes these names down. And that's
Hmm.
how first accurate accounting. And the Vietnamese didn't know that until we started pressuring them on, where is so and so and so and so. Um, So to put a bow on Forgotten, a reviewer in the San Francisco Book Chronicle, I never can remember the exact name, wrote that, which was actually an alias, um,
Hmm.
was a badass nymphomaniac lesbian assassin. But she's probably the most complicated character I've created, again
Hmm.
because absolutely ruthless and very good at what she does. Uh,
Hmm.
are typically the most violent terrorists, um, and or can be among most violent. And so but then she walks away when she meets her lover, and she lives for 19 years in plain sight under the alias or a new identity called Janice Goodrich. And
Okay.
so that's, and again, she's wealthy beyond her means, and how she acquires the wealth through fees and and she inherited some money, not from her parents,
Mhm.
but the cutout who was her go-between her employers and her. So nobody never saw her or met her.
Okay. So is the Forgotten primarily about the POWs, and then the Red Star of Death is primarily about Janet?
No, actually, this book Forgotten is about both the POWs and Janet.
Okay. And then
This
the
book
Red Star of Death
is
is Okay, go ahead and do your reading from the Red Star of Death.
So I'm gonna this is partway into one of the passages, because it, again, remember I told you she's vulnerable and she's, and wealthy. I've got tons of money. What do I do? Okay, so she's parked in the scene starts. She's parked in front of her parents' house in Northbrook, Illinois. Okay, and she has not seen or talked to her parents since they threw her out for her radical views. I'll get into that second. So it says Janet. Janet hadn't been inside the house since she walked out with what possessions she could fit in her 1967 Volvo 123 GT. After the graduation ceremony on the Madison campus of the University of Wisconsin, she headed west into the unknown. There was no graduation celebration, no dinner, no smiling faces. She only saw tears flowing down her mother's cheeks as both her parents told Janice not to return until she changed her radical and political and social views. The day before graduation, she closed out her savings and checking account, which gave her $2,489 in cash, most of which she earned as a waitress in one of Madison's nicer restaurants. As she walked to her car, her father handed her a cashier's check for $9,648, which was what was left of the money he had set aside to pay for her college education. Janet's thank you was genuine, but the hug was awkward. Running your only daughter out of the house on rails, Janet's now believed it was harder on her parents than her. At the time, she wanted out and felt the separation was good riddance. In the ensuing years, she drove by the house several times, but never went in. What could they talk about? Each time, Janice replayed the same conversation. Mom or Dad? Janice, have you changed your social and political views? Janice, yes, I have. Now I'm a capitalist with a portfolio of over 340 million, and I live in Dallas. Mom or Dad? That's a change. How'd you make your money? Janice, I was a freelance assassin for about 12 years. She was about to go to the next question when Janice saw her mother and father leave the house. Her mother was using a cane and holding her father's arm as they walked down the steps to the Volvo. They were still erect but grayer. Her dad was 81 and her mother 79, and in June they'd be married 63 years. Tears flowed down Janice's cheeks as she toyed with meeting them. Afraid of the conversation, Janice started the rental Malibu and slowly drove past to get a look at her parents, wondering if this would be the last time she'd see both alive. The ache in her chest and the tightness in her stomach was hard to ignore. Janice wondered if they ever thought about her. Maybe the time had come to reintroduce herself to them. So that's part of Janice's dilemma.
Right.
She can't have, or it's difficult because somebody has to understand her business or what she did, and not want to turn her into the law enforcement for a reward.
Right. Right.
So this book is out. I actually have a third one in which she actually meets her parents.
Mhm.
But in fact, I'll probably publish it sometime next year. But so it's that thing. And also in this book, she has another epiphany about religion, because she was raised a Catholic.
Okay.
And she was not very happy about Catholicism.
Mhm.
Into the religion.
So she's going to go from an assassin to how much is she going to change, or would that be a spoiler?
Well, what she does when she retires is she and her lover go around the world. They go skiing, they travel,
Mhm.
boatloads of money, and she's essentially. So what happens after 9/11? Three of the intelligence agencies who hired her, who hired her through the broker, started looking for her because
Mhm.
use her services again. And then there was a rogue FBI agent, when he got wind of this, who decides to try to put her in jail. So she's now,
Mhm.
I don't want to use the word hunted, not hunted to kill, but hunted to be hired. And
Okay.
she ultimately, in Red Star Death, she decides to work for the Israelis and the CIA, but she insists that CIA gets the Department of Justice to give her an indemnity agreement for all that
Mhm.
done in U.S. territory when she was active. And in return, she said, I'm willing to tell you all about what I did and who I worked for.
Mhm.
So they agree. And then she has to deal with traitors. And so then the CIA and Mossad agreed to go after a couple specific members of Hezbollah, and she has to deal with traitors in CIA, traitors in a traitor in Mossad, and also this rogue FBI agent, and some other difficulties that make the
Mhm.
story. And it's on its way to be.
So a lot of adventure. Now, what have you done to market? You've obviously done very well with sales. What was your secret? Every author wants to know.
And every author, I do very little for in any advertising. When I started out, I bought paid reviews, didn't work. I tried social media, even had an Instagram account. I still have it's now an X account, was Twitter.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and I have a Facebook page. I found everybody tells you I got to do that, and people are interested. Well, yes and no. It doesn't sell books.
Mm-hmm.
So where Marc Liebman has evolved to is I have a very very content. I produce podcasts on various topics,
Mm-hmm.
speaking a lot. You only see what's can be public can walk into. So if I have a contract with a company and I'm doing a leadership presentation or I'm doing one on foreign affairs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
employee, obviously it doesn't appear on my public website. And so I get paid for that. What I have found worked is that and book signings. So I live in North Central Texas
Mm-hmm.
and teaching myself how to do this by contacting Rotary clubs in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And
Okay.
it's about, I probably did in the first 2 years, 3 or 4 of them. And I would stand there the first thing I learned is if I walk in, try selling my book, it's a non-starter for the Rotary Club.
Okay.
So the second thing I learned out of this was that you have to develop an elevator speech. And so if there's 20, sell 4 to 5 books. Um, but the big thing, and I don't have it handy, but I can show it to you. I would take people who wanted to learn more about me and my writing and my books. I would take their names and addresses, and their email addresses, and I add them to my mailing list. And so it's kind of topped out at around 4,000. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
being, often and people join, people leave, but it keeps going up. But it's about 4,000.
Okay.
So when I put out a newsletter every month, that newsletter list, and it has news, what books I'm working on, and my public calendar and my blog. That's the last thing I do is I produce
Okay.
a blog period between 1775 and roughly 1816, although I've on things that you don't read about, but also things
Mm-hmm.
that we still deal with today.
Okay.
My website, it's on a bunch of other places. And what I find is that I get feedback, and there are a lot of people don't read my blog and make comments. I encourage people to do it. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
But what's proven successful was the speaking, the
Okay.
newsletter. So when in the one that'll be coming out in first week in November, it'll say Fight We Shall, which is the 7th book in the Age of Sail series, is available. It's on the bookshelves. It should be released next week. I have a conference call with a woman who's converting it.
Mm-hmm.
I know the answer to that question, but anyway, let's say next week, and I will sell probably 5, 6, 7, 800 books. Boom, just the people
Nice.
who are on that list. So it's a bit of guerrilla marketing.
Okay.
The reason, what I learned very early on was that the major publishers controlled the distributors. And even though I'm on Ingram's list and ReaderLink and all that kind of good stuff, I don't have a Doubleday or Random House shoving them through the distribution system. So I
Okay.
got to.
So what does that mean, that they're not on the bookstore shelves?
Correct.
Okay. Right. And that's where I am too. And I think that's where a lot of authors are, but then so many people buy off Amazon and they can still be ordered through the brick and mortar stores.
Correct. So what I learned very early on is that if I want to go to a Barnes and Noble, for example, and brick and
Hmm.
mortar store, I had to have books in a warehouse that they could. And this is before print on demand was really big. Print on
Hmm.
demand changed to some degree. You can still buy my books through any one of 13 different distributors. But like if you go to Barnes and Noble, they'll order it and it'll be delivered 24, 48 hours from
Hmm.
Amazon. They use to print them. But um, but what Barnes and Noble wanted me was to have a warehouse, and they would buy the books, and then if they didn't sell within 90 days, they'd ship them back. So now I'm going to pay the warehouse,
Yeah,
restocking. Blah, blah, blah. So right now, my warehouse is right behind me.
right.
It's
Yeah,
have
mine's in my
boxes,
basement. Yep,
yeah,
I've got boxes and boxes.
and um, and so I keep a small inventory. But again, in fact, I was just doing this yesterday. I make money from my YouTube channel. I
Hmm.
make these from all these things, but 90%, 95, probably 98% of my books are sold through Amazon. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, but was a BookBub and
Hmm.
Kobo. Again, if I look at the royalty statements, both from the legacy publisher that published my first 10 books, and the ones I get, most of it's Amazon. So
Yep.
the advertising I have done, and this comes back to the long part of the question, has been on Amazon. Amazon has some really neat programs that are reasonably expensive, and I've tried them, and some of them have worked pretty well. They stopped the
Hmm.
program, blows me away, but it is what it is. And so
Right.
so here's the other thing is I've been approached at least once a month. I get somebody who either hits me on LinkedIn or sends me an email and say, "Hey, I'm so and so. I do book promotion. Blah 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 blah. I want to help you, be first in SEO." And I go, "Okay, who have you worked for? What genres have you worked for? Because you've not worked in historical fiction or fiction." And so that's number one. The second thing I said, "Okay, here's how I measure success." Book signings, because I can then calculate book sales, interviews with people like you, which when we get done, hopefully you'll allow me to put the link on my website. I'll
Oh,
promote it.
definitely.
I'll
Hmm.
put, so anyway, so and then about book signings, media interviews, book sales, and are you interested in a deal in which I'm willing to compensate you at a base fee, but if you don't meet the target, you get less. If you meet the target or exceed the target, you get more. And I have only gotten one person to take that on, and that's the woman who helps me book speaking engagements. And she said, I just need a bigger percentage. And I said, great, next question. Let's negotiate that number. Now she's retiring at the end. And I won't say it's freaking me out, but it's um,
Right. Well, I get those probably almost daily on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and the whole long list. I usually say, that's great. My specialty is writing books. They're available on Amazon if you would like to read them. And sometimes they push me, and it gets annoying. Let's just put it that way. And I wonder how many ever make sales that way, or get clients. But so it sounds like you did find someone who does a great job for you.
yeah. So yeah, I've been scammed a couple times.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not surprised.
and so I'm even more, what's the right word, more cynical. Um,
Hmm.
I have had some pretty interesting conversations with a lot of people. And I'm going, show me the results. Give me some case studies to make me believe you know what you're doing. And
Right.
case study 20 odd years as a consultant, it's what was the business problem you're hired to solve? What were the metrics? What were the results? And in terms of the metrics, and which basically tells me how the cash register rang. And if you can't,
Hmm.
I'm not interested. And
Right.
so, my
Right. And I think that they probably get an awful lot of business from authors who are so excited to put out their first book and don't yet know that you're going to get these every day of the week. And most of them, they can't guarantee it. I guess that's my experience in marketing. I used to be in a writers group that focused on marketing and business aspect. And we had people who put a ton of work into marketing, had nothing to show for it. We had one person, just by dumb luck, his book showed up in the right place at the right time, and he woke up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in his bank account with no clue how this happened. And I was sort of in the middle where I did a lot of work at marketing and it was paying off pretty well. But what we concluded, and what I've concluded talking to other authors and reading online, is you really don't know what one thing is going to work. And what works today might not work next year. So I got a huge boost from blog tours, and that was around 2010. As far as I can tell, they don't work that well anymore, because I've paid for a few authors to go on blog tours for my publishing company and got nothing for it. And they were good books. So there's no reason it shouldn't have worked, but that's what I've been told.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think so. As a part of the volunteer work I do is for two military aviator associations, I run writers' workshops. Okay,
Mhm.
I co-work with somebody else, and another one I do it myself. And the one I've gotten about 16, 17 books out.
Mhm.
Gotten, and the other one I don't know what the total number is, but it will probably the same out. And the one I'm co-authored, we were at the Navy Helicopter Association event 3 years ago, and he walks up to us and shows us a contract from a producer for $16 million.
Oh, wow.
Because he had written a book that we had helped him through the process. A reader read it. As it turns out, it was a famous actor. He went to the people who produced a couple of his movies, and next thing you know, he's got a movie contract. And
That's
I, um, my hat's off to him. Both the other gentleman and I said, "Where's our cut?" And he looked at us and laughed,
right.
and we were not
That's
serious.
great.
And said, "Thank you very much. I don't know how much to take, but yes, I've gotten to the point now is when your proposal or when your idea arrives on somebody's desk, if they're looking for books about elephants with purple polka dots and your book is about tigers with green spots, you're done. Delete.
Mhm.
Next, um, next person or next thing. And it's the same with queries. Um,
Mhm.
a row of books up here, agents and publishers and what they're interested in. And of course, the book is probably the information is a year old when the book comes out. I understand that, but it's directionally correct because you can look at what that publisher publishes, uh, and you send off queries, and you think, hey, this is spot on, and it's
Mhm.
crickets. When I
Yep.
first started Charity, to call a couple agents that I sent queries to, and they said, "Oh, why are you calling me?" I said, "Because you haven't responded." And as a consultant, that's what I was trained to do is, follow up. And they said, "Well, we don't, if you don't hear from us, that means we're not interested in you." I said, "Okay, well, now that I got you on the phone, can you answer a couple of questions?" And I got a couple of them talking for 5 or 10 minutes. And this was in 2014, 15. So the publishing industry was going through some really ugly times. We had a recession going on. We were the advent of self-publishing, and the ebook was just coming in the market. And these guys were all terrified. But what they basically told me is that what we put on our website is what we put on our website, and it's current the moment we push save. But
Right.
and if if I know a publisher is looking for this kind of book, that's all I'm looking for. And if your book hits, great. Then we have a conversation. If it doesn't match that, I'm not interested. And I
Uh-huh.
thought pretty insightful.
Right. Where can people find you online?
My website is markliebman.com, and it has information on my books and what I speak on. Has my blog. If you, I'm on I think every electronic distributor, as does 5 library programs. Oh, I think one just went out of business. So I'm pretty easy to find. You type my name into Google and it pops up. You type my name into YouTube, it pops up. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
And read stuff and you send me emails, I respond to them. If you send me hate mail, I just delete it.
I will not waste my time sending you hate mail then. You'll be glad to know I haven't planned to anyway, but this seals the deal. So
I have gotten hate mail, and I've gotten,
how do you really?
oh yeah. There's one video on my YouTube channel in which I dispel the Palestinians' claim to land in that, because it's a
Right,
myth. It's historical, correct. And for weeks after that came out, I got hate mail, I got threats, and I just ignored them.
right.
I did answer to one who threatened me. I said, "Hey, if you're interested, fine. Just understand it's a lot different when the bullets go both ways."
Right. Yeah. They should be aware of who they're talking to. That's just a shame that people have to resort to that kind of stuff instead of discussing it. So people can find me at booksandbrews.net, at laurabosica.com. Our sponsor, gabrielswornpress.com. You can find lots of authors there. And you can find all those chickens I was talking about and the rabbits and the sheep at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com. And you can guess which one is the one that trampled me. Got trampled by a 175-pound ram a couple months ago. So coming up next, we have A.K. Karos, who is a former sports broadcaster and TV host turned children's author. And that is for Books and Brews Light. Our next Books and Brews full podcast, which goes out to all the podcast sites, is Ashley Fontaine and Andrea Emmes with their book Eternal Beauty, which is a psychological horror. And we are kind of putting out calls right now for 2 types of authors. We would like any authors of Christmassy or wintry novels or books to be on our December interviews. And we are hoping to find an author of medieval fiction who either lives near Knoxville or can travel to Knoxville, because we have a very unique and wonderful place to film that interview. So if you write medieval fiction, contact me. Thank you very much for being on the program. Cheers.